The last primary source related to visual imagery are paintings and other artworks. Paintings are visual representations based on the artist's expression and interpretation of events and ideas. These become useful historical sources when we have to know or understand the context of the period when they are made, such as the Spolarium of 1 Luna, wherein this shows the context of time or trends way back 19th century, which are liberty, nationalism, equality, and freedom, to name a few. In this next mural painting of Carlos Botong Francisco, dated 1964, shows the context of bloody revolution to achieve freedom of the nation against hostile Spanish colonizers. Meanwhile, this next painting shows the context of peaceful revolution against the dictatorial regime of then President Marcos. See how paintings show context of time? How about photographs? Photographs as primary sources reflect social conditions of historical realities and everyday life. They also give us visual ideas of places, historical events, as well as people. It is said that picture tells 1,000 words. Today, however, with the advent of technology, pictures can easily be made to lie using digital softwares, wherein pictures are edited. Look at your profile pictures at Facebook. Many of these lie about your true physical image. But photographs still tell stories, and from this we can distinguish details that tell the other side of a story or something beyond text. Photographs are also records of the past, which are useful for historians. Like this picture of Rojas Boulevard in 1950s. We can see that Manila Bay was still clean and free from garbage. The sand of the beach was still white. How about this picture of Rojas Boulevard during the early 1930s? It shows that the boulevard was first called by the Americans as Dewey Boulevard and Rojas Boulevard in the late 1800s. What matters most is throughout time the perennial problem in this area is flooding during strong typhoons. Every time the seawall of Manila is battered by strong waves. Another picture shows the typical 19th century women vendors in a public market of Manila. Examining the details will give us many things, such as their products, containers of their products, headgear, and manner of dressing among Filipino women that time. Whereas in this picture, we can see school children and their teachers in the early 1900s. This is how class pictures look like during those times. How about this picture? We can see the typical American cabaret in the Philippines during the early 1930s. For your information, cabaret is the early form of disco in the country introduced by the Americans. This is where the rich and famous held their parties until they dropped. Photographs preserve also events like the execution of Dr. Jose Rizal at Bagumbayan in December 30, 1896. And this one is the actual surrender of the guerrilla fighters to the American forces in 1900. This one is the entry of a Japanese tank at Intramuros, while this one is the Battle of Balete Pass in Santa Fe, Nueva Vizcaya. Photos do not only show historical events but also personalities, such as the sole picture of Andres Bonifacio that was found. It shows the real image of the Supremo ng Katipunan, General Emilio Aguinaldo in his 20s and at the age of 90, President Manuel L. Quezon while suffering from tuberculosis, and me at 2 years old. Photographs are important, most especially in restoring historical buildings, such as the Quiapo Church, St. Vincent Parish Church, Ateneo de Manila University's first building, Manila City Hall, Philippine Assembly Building, now the National Museum of the Philippines. Another type of primary source is written sources. Some examples of primary sources are contemporary letters, eyewitness accounts, official documents, political declarations and decrees, administrative texts, as well as histories and biographies written in the period being studied. Example is the document written in Baybayin discovered at the archive section of the University of Santo Tomas. The two records are the oldest of their kind. Both were written in Baybayin. The records happen to be early deeds of sale. The first one was executed in the year 1613, while the second one was made in 1635. Interestingly, the deeds of sale also highlight the role of women in ancient Philippine society as landowners and entrepreneurs. This show the pre-colonial women in the Philippines apparently had the same power as men to own and sell lands. Another document is the letters of Major Lazaro Macapagal, the man who was ordered by General Aguinaldo to execute Andres Bonifacio and his brother. This will tell how the Supremo was murdered by the men of General Aguinaldo. Eyewitness account is another primary source. Basically, it is a testimony of an eyewitness. Example is the testimony of Sandra Burton. In August 1983, Sandra Burton, a Time magazine correspondent, boarded a China Airlines plane along with other reporters accompanying the Philippine opposition leader Benigno Aquino Jr. on his return to Manila. During the flight, in a long interview before the plane landed, she listened to him talk animatedly about breaking his exile to convince President Ferdinand Marcos to institute reforms. Seconds after security men escorted Aquino off the plane, and then Miss Burton heard gunshots. Rushing to the cabin window, she saw Aquino sprawled on the tarmac, lying dead. Her account to the assassination is one story which will give an inside view of what happened that day. The second general type of historical sources is secondary source. It is regarded as second-hand work that is the result of reconstructing and interpreting the past using primary sources. Common examples are textbooks, articles, researches, analysis, and even websites. This historical source interprets and analyzes primary sources. Secondary source may have pictures, quotes, or graphics of primary sources in them. The history books that we read in grade school, high school, and senior high school are concrete examples of secondary sources. Other examples are indices, bibliographies, abstracts, biographical works, references, literature reviews, journals, and review articles.